Welcome to Professor Teaches Excel 2021. In this chapter, you will learn the fundamentals of how to work with Excel workbooks. You will examine the features of the Excel window, learn how to move around a workbook, and explore ways to select cells. You will also open, create, save, and close workbooks. Excel is a powerful application designed to manage financial information, perform mathematical calculations, track database information, and more. Although the workbooks you create do not necessarily have to contain numbers, the strength of Excel lies in its capabilities to manipulate numeric information. The most common uses of Excel are to create spreadsheets, lists, tables, and charts. A spreadsheet is a collection of information that generally tracks financial, accounting, and other numeric data. For example, you can use a spreadsheet to track income and expenses. A list is a structured collection of information that stores multiple instances of the same type of information. For example, you can use a list to store addresses and phone numbers. The main difference between a spreadsheet and a list is that a spreadsheet can contain different elements, whereas the information in a list must contain the same elements. You can convert any list data into a table, which adds automatic sorting, filtering, and calculation features. A chart is a visual representation of the numeric information in a spreadsheet or a list. Charts are created from existing data. Excel offers specific tools to work with spreadsheets, lists, tables, and charts. To learn about these tools, you will work with the business and financial data of a fictitious organic foods company named Organically Sown. After installation, Office applications can be found on the Start menu. Let's start Excel now using the Start menu. By default, Excel displays the Start screen when you launch. If you prefer to have a blank workbook displayed each time you open the application, you can change the settings available from Options on the File menu. When opening a workbook, you choose to create your own blank workbook, open an existing workbook from the Recent pane or Open Other Documents link, or to start with a template. You can find several available templates in the right pane of the Start screen, or search online for additional options. Let's open a blank workbook. When you open Excel, a blank workbook is displayed in the Work area. The workbook is used to store all of the data you enter. Each workbook is made up of multiple worksheets. Each worksheet is labeled with a Sheet tab. By default, a workbook contains 3 worksheets, but you can add and delete worksheets. A worksheet is made up of vertical columns and horizontal rows. Each column is labeled with a letter, and each row is labeled with a number. These labels are referred to as column headings and row headings. The intersection of a row and a column is called a cell. You enter information into the cells to create your worksheet or list. Each cell is referred to using its corresponding column heading letter, followed by its row heading number. For example, the upper left cell in a worksheet is referred to as A1. This is called the cell address or the cell reference. In addition to the ribbon and other common Office components, the Excel window contains features designed specifically for creating worksheets. The formula bar displays the data currently in a cell and can also be used to enter and edit data. The name box displays the reference for the currently selected cell. As you'll learn later, the name box can contain other references. The box around cell A1 in the worksheet is called the cell selector. The cell selector marks the cell that can be edited or manipulated. To enter or edit data in other cells in a worksheet, you must first move the cell selector. You can do this using several methods. Click another cell. Press the up, down, left, and right arrow keys on the keyboard. Press the page up and page down keys. Press the tab key. Try using the down arrow and right arrow keys to move the cell selector to cell B2. Good. Cell B2 is now selected. The selected cell is also referred to as the active cell. Excel offers another way to move the cell selector. The Go To feature lets you specify a cell address and move the cell selector directly to that cell. This feature is helpful when you need to access a cell that is further down or across the worksheet. The Go To feature is accessible from the Find and Select tool, which is located in the Editing group on the Home tab. Let's take a look. Now you just need to enter the address of the cell to be selected. Cell W145 is now selected. Notice that the column heading W and the row heading 145 are shaded. The name box also contains the cell address. You can move the selector to cell A1 at any time using the Control plus Home key combination. Let's move back to cell A1.
फिर क्या
Now let's open an existing workbook and use it to learn more about Excel's features. As in all Office programs, the File tab leads to commands to locate and open files. Let's take a look. The options available on the Open screen allow you to select a location from which to open a workbook. If you've previously been working with a worksheet or workbook, that file will display in the Recent Workbooks area. When you select a location, the Open dialog box will display, where you can select a file to open. Let's open a workbook that is stored in the Prices folder. The left side of the Open dialog box provides convenient access to common storage areas. The right side displays the contents of the currently selected storage area. By default, the contents of the Documents folder are displayed. To view the contents of a folder within the Documents folder, double-click its icon. The Prices folder contains several workbook files. To open a file, you can either double-click the file name or click the file name and then click the Open button. Good! The workbook has replaced the blank workbook in the work area. The weekly price list workbook consists of multiple worksheets, as indicated by the sheet tabs above the status bar. Each worksheet contains price information for 1 week during March and April. The first worksheet, April 21 price list, is currently displayed. This is called the active worksheet. Not all of the workbook information can be displayed inside the work area at once. Excel offers several ways to navigate the workbook. The scroll bars on the bottom and right side of the screen are used to move around the current worksheet. Currently, only the vertical scroll bar is in view. By dragging the scroll box up and down the vertical scroll bar, you can view the top and bottom of the worksheet. The horizontal scroll bar is used to scroll left and right to display columns that are not currently in view. To display another worksheet, you can click the Sheet tab of the worksheet you want to view. Let's look at another worksheet. The April 7 price list sheet is now the active worksheet. Another way to move among worksheets is by pressing the Control key plus the Page Up or Page Down key. This displays the worksheet directly to the left or right of the current worksheet. This workbook contains 8 worksheets, but all of the sheet tabs are not visible at one time. Excel provides buttons in the lower left of the workbook that allow you to view the other sheet tabs by clicking the left or right scrolling buttons or the ellipses. Let's display the next 2 sheet tabs on the right. Note that the scrolling buttons do not select worksheet tabs. Instead, they just bring other tabs into view. Right-clicking the buttons displays a menu with all the worksheets available. Using the Control key and clicking with the left mouse button lets you scroll directly to the last worksheet. Now display the first worksheet again. Once your worksheet contains data, you may need to manipulate it in various ways, such as moving, copying, and formatting it. To manipulate any cell or group of cells, you first need to select it. A group of cells is referred to as a range in Excel. To select a range of cells, you can click the first cell you want to select and then drag the mouse pointer to include the rest of the cells. Try this now by selecting the range of cells from A2 to A10. Good. The range is now shaded, indicating that it is selected. You can now work with this range as a single item. A range of cells is referred to by the first cell in the range and the last cell in the range, separated by a colon. For example, the currently selected cell range is referred to as A2:A10. You can also select a range of cells by clicking the first cell and then clicking the last cell while holding down the Shift key. Let's try that method to select the cell range A11:H14. Good. The selected cell range is referred to as A11:H14. If you want to select an entire row or column, you just click the row or column heading. Let's select column F. You can select all the cells in the worksheet by clicking the Select All button. It is located above row heading 1 and to the left of column heading A. Good. As you edit workbooks later in the course, You'll learn even more ways to select cells. Now select just cell A1. Although you will often work with existing workbooks, you will also need to create new ones. Excel offers several ways to create a new workbook. You can create one from scratch using a blank workbook or create one from an existing workbook. Workbooks can also be created using a template. A template is a workbook that provides a pre-formatted layout for the information in a workbook. You customize the content to create your own workbook. Let's create a workbook using a template. To create any type of new workbook, open the New Document dialog box, which is accessible from the File menu. The right pane contains available templates for creating documents from templates that are stored on your computer. The search box allows you to locate additional templates from a variety of templates that are stored on the Microsoft Office website. The Blank Workbook option lets you create a new blank workbook from scratch. If you have recently used a template, it will also appear in this section. Notice also that suggested searches are offered to help categorize templates. Organically Sewn needs to create a spreadsheet that tracks its budgeted income and expenses. Rather than create the workbook from scratch, let's use a template. The budget category contains a variety of budget workbooks you can use. The center pane now displays a thumbnail of each template and wizard. Right now, the Family Budget template is selected. You can scroll through the thumbnails in the center pane or narrow down your options using the Category pane on the right. Let's look at the Expense Budget Spreadsheet template. Once you have decided on the template you want, you click the Create button in the right pane. The Expense Budget template provides placeholders such as company name for you to enter information into the template. You can enter information directly into the placeholders on this template. You can also enter information in any cell. When you save the information, Excel will prompt you to name and save the template as a workbook. Saving your data as a workbook preserves the template for future use. On second thought, this template is not exactly what Organically Sewn needs to track both income and expenses. Instead, let's create a spreadsheet from scratch. Although a blank workbook was displayed when you first opened Excel, it has been replaced by the weekly price list workbook that you opened. You can open a new blank workbook using the New option on the File tab or by just pressing the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+N. Good. The next step is to start entering data. You will learn all about entering data later in the course, but let's enter information into one cell right now. Select cell A3 and then type the first label. Notice that the formula bar also displays the text you just entered. The three buttons to the left of the formula bar became active when you began typing. From here, you can commit the data to the cell by pressing Enter, which will move the cell selector down one cell. You can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move the cell selector and commit the data. If you don't want to move the cell selector, you can click the button with the check mark to the left of the formula bar. This is the Enter button, and it commits the data without moving the cell selector. Good. The data is in the cell, and the formula bar displays the text. Although this workbook contains only one cell of data, let's save it to work on later. To do this, you can use the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar or the Save command on the File. By default, Excel will store the workbook in the Documents folder, which is currently open. Let's store the workbook in the Finances folder. Now that you have entered a file name and chosen a location, the last step is to click the Save button. The format of the workbook is now .xlsx, which you'll be able to see in Details view when viewing the file from a folder. Once the workbook is saved, you can close the workbook or exit Excel without losing any work. Let's see how to close all of the documents that are currently open. In addition to the Close button on the Excel title bar, each workbook has its own Close Window button on the far right side of the ribbon tabs. Each workbook also has its own Minimize Window and Restore Maximize Window buttons. Let's use the Close Window button to close the budget workbook. The budget workbook has been closed, and the Expense Budget 1 workbook is now displayed. Now, close this workbook using its Close Window button. Because the current workbook is a new workbook based on a template, Excel asks if you want to save the workbook before closing it. Anytime you try to close a workbook that has not been saved, you will see this message. In this example, you do not need to save the workbook. Now there is just one workbook open. Clicking the Close button on the Excel title bar will close both the workbook and the Excel program. Another way to close the workbook is by using the Close command on the File menu. Let's take a look. The Close command closes just the active workbook and leaves the Excel program open. The Exit Excel button at the bottom of the File menu closes the Excel program. Let's close just the workbook. The workbook area is now empty, and the tools on the Ribbons Home tab are disabled. From here, you can start a new workbook or open an existing one using the File menu. In this chapter, you examined the features of the Excel window. You used several methods for navigating a workbook and explored ways to select cell ranges. You created a workbook from a template and also started a new workbook. You also learned how to open, save, and close workbooks.